Today I was in my school lesson learning physiology, and I was looking at the spine. And the spine is often referred to as the moral organ of the body, or the backbone of the body. Have you ever heard anyone being referred to as spineless? Well, that means that they lack the moral courage to stand for principle in bad conditions. And so I was looking at that, and I was looking at the different bones that the spine has. You know, the spine is made up of different bones, not just one bone as it may suggest. The spine is made up of 24 little bones, different unique bones called vertebrae. The single form of that is vertebra, and the plural is vertebrae or vertebrates. And the name vertebrae means to turn, because the spine is what is used to turn the torso of your body. And you know, it can remind us of the 24 different bones can remind us of the spiritual parallel in the Bible, that there were 24 priests and 24 elders in heaven. And there are 24 courses of priests in the Bible. You see it in the Levitical law. There are 24 courses. And Zacharias, who was John the Baptist's father, he was of the course of Abia. So we see here that there are 24 priests, courses of priests, and Zacharias, he was of one of the courses called Abia. Well, what spiritual parallel can we draw from that? I was looking at 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, and the Bible says, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." So here it's saying that we are a holy priesthood. So what does that mean? Well, to be a priest, it says here that we are offering up spiritual sacrifices. We offer up spiritual sacrifices. What are the sacrifices that we offer? Well, we offer up our lives, our bodies, when we're following the health message, when we're following God's principles, when we're walking upright, following right principles, we are surrendering and sacrificing our lives to God. That's a sacrifice that we offer, a sacrifice of our own lives, our own characters. So in that way we are priests, but we can only do that if we are living upright, if we are following right principles. And remember at the beginning, a few minutes ago, I was mentioning how the spine is the moral backbone of the body. Well, that reminds us of how we are supposed to be, that have a backbone. Remember I said it means to stand for right in difficult circumstances. So we are supposed to stand for what we know to be right, to be upright even in difficult circumstances when everyone else is following wrong. And in my personal devotion time, I've been looking at different young examples of different young people in the Bible who had moral backbone, who stood for truth in the midst of all the corruption around them. And I just wanted to list a few of them and see how we can apply their lives to ourselves. The first one is Joseph. Joseph, he had moral backbone to stand for the right, because if you remember from the story, in Potiphar's house, when he was at his master's house, Potiphar's wife tried to entice him to commit sin. And remember what Joseph said? Joseph said, "How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" In Joseph's mind, what he wanted to do was to do right, to do what was pleasing in God's eyes. And he knew that he couldn't sin against God with Potiphar's wife and please God. So he chose to walk upright, stand for what was right. He had moral backbone. That's what I mean by moral backbone. Another example in the Bible is that of Jesus, of course. He's the greatest example. Jesus in the town of Nazareth, where all the young people in that town were following wickedness. Remember what he said? He said, "It is written." He followed the Bible as his counsel. And not just those young people, but also the priests and elders in his synagogue or the church where he was near. They tried to entice him to follow wrong. But he stood for what was right, and he even showed them the Bible, and he tried to converse with them and to get them to understand as he understood, but he did it in his own childlike way. One more example is that of Daniel, of course, when he was in Babylon, at the court of Babylon. There are two examples in his life where the first time was when he heard the story of Daniel and the king's food. Well, the Bible says in Daniel 1 verse 8 that he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's meat. he made a purposeful decision. He had moral backbone to stand for right, even though there were thousands, hundreds of Hebrew captives of his companions who were living with him at Babylon and who were eating the king's meat. He purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. He had moral backbone. And at a later period in his life, and he was a young person, at a later period, there was a time when King Darius made a decree that anyone who should pray to God or to man, ask a request for 30 days, would be thrown into the lion's den. But Daniel, he had moral backbone. He stood for the right under difficult circumstances, that even though the king made this decree, the Bible says that Daniel went to his window in his house and prayed to God, as his custom was 3 times a day. And the people caught him, of course, but he knew that people would catch him. But he was still willing, under difficult circumstances, under the threat of being killed, being thrown into the lion's den. I mean, that's very fearful. But he was willing to stand for truth, stand for what he believed to be right in the midst of all of that. And so, as young people today, we can gather lessons from that. Today, things are probably doubly worse than they were in the Bible times. And there's so much corruption around us, when we go into the city, especially if we live in the city. But we can remember from the lives of Joseph and Daniel and Jesus and so many others, we can remember to stand for truth in the midst of all the wrong around us. And, we can be like the lilies in the pond. The lilies, they are white and clean and pure in the midst of all the dirty water around it. And so it can remind us of how we should be in this world, that even though we may be in the city or we may not be in favorable circumstances, we can stand for truth, stand for what we know to be right, to be upright in the midst of these circumstances. And this is an acceptable sacrifice to God. So I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you've learned something from this. God bless.